The first time he stood up, it was for himself. This time, it would be for everyone watching. And for her. The date of the annual general meeting was circled on the calendar in his office in red ink. Not by him. Joyce had done it. A little too hard, the marker squeaking on the glossy paper. Your coronation, she'd said dryly, or your execution. We'll see. Now it loomed like a storm. The AGM is where she cements it, Attorney Park said, tapping the agenda packet. She'll move to ratify the interim guardianship, push through amendments that consolidate her voting bloc, and appoint more of her people to key committees. They sat in the same small conference room where this all started, only this time the coffee was better, and the man at the head of the table didn't look like he might collapse. Do-hyun listened, back straight, fingers laced together. He wasn't fully recovered. His body still protested long days. His head still throbbed when stress spiked. But the fog that had wrapped around him for years was gone. In its place was something harder. Resolve. What we do there, Park continued, has to be precise. One misstep and she paints this as a tragic episode from a grieving son with unresolved trauma. So, Ji-hoon said, we don't give her missteps. We give her landmines. They had spent nights gathering them. Doctors willing to testify, off the record for now, on the record if pushed. The neurologist backed by two other specialists, all confirming the long-term harm caused by the medication regime. The family doctor, recorded in a late-night call with Park, stammering through excuses about pressure from Mrs. King and family expectations before finally whispering, I knew it wasn't right. Old staff, tracked down in small towns and cheap apartments, who remembered a little boy staggering after cups of special tea and a young chairman arguing with his wife behind closed doors. He said he wanted to reduce the dose, one former housekeeper had said, wringing her hands. Madam was furious. She said, he's weak. He will die without it. Do you want that on our heads? After that, we just obeyed. Investors loyal to his father, men and women whose fortunes had risen with Chairman Kang's early risks, who still kept his photo on their walls. He trusted you, one gray-haired fund manager told Do-hyun over lunch. He said you had more conscience than he ever did. Then you faded into the background. We thought you didn't want it. They knew now why he'd faded. You will stand there, Park said, pulling him back to the present, not as a victim demanding sympathy, but as the rightful heir presenting facts. The more calm you are, the more hysterical she will appear. She doesn't do hysterical, he said. She does surgical. Park smiled grimly. Then we will do open heart surgery on her reputation. And if the board still chooses her, he asked, if they decide rotten roots are better than uncertain ones? Then we walk away knowing we offered them the truth, Park said. But I don't believe they will. Not all of them. When money smells scandal, it moves. He turned to Joyce. And you, Miss Cole, he said, what does your storyteller's nose say? She was at the end of the table, laptop open, a document filled with bullet points and highlighted phrases in front of her. She chewed her pen cap, thinking, you can't go in there as the boy they kept sick, she said. If you stand up and say, look what they did to me, half the room will feel sorry and the other half will think, still weak. She clicked to the draft of his speech. You go in as the man your father prayed you'd become, she continued, the one who sees his own story clearly and chooses what to do with it. You acknowledge the darkness, but you don't center it. You center what you're going to build on the other side. He watched her as she spoke, the way her hands moved when she explained something, the fire in her eyes when she talked about narrative like it was both an art and a weapon. What if I can't breathe? He asked quietly. Her gaze softened. You will, she said. But if you can't, we build pauses into the speech. Moments where you stop, sip water, let them sit with what you just said. Intentional silence looks like power, not panic. And if I panic anyway, he pressed, then you panic, she said, and you keep going. Courage isn't the absence of fear, remember? It's showing up with your voice shaking and talking anyway. She slid a sticky note across the table. He picked it up. It read, in her messy handwriting, "You're more than what they did to you." He swallowed. "Put it in your pocket," she said, "or your phone case, somewhere you can touch it if you need to remember." He did. The morning of the AGM dawned gray and heavy. Kang Group's headquarters buzzed like a beehive. Shareholders in expensive suits streamed through the lobby, badges clipped to lapels. Staff rushed to and fro, arms full of reports. Security tightened. In a quiet room 1 floor above the main auditorium, Do-hyun stared at his reflection. The mirror showed a man in a charcoal suit, tie straight, hair tamed. The scar at his temple peeked out if you knew where to look. He didn't look like the boy who'd once passed out on a bathroom floor and woken up with his stepmother's concern hovering over him. He looked like his father. The realization scared him more than anything. Joyce stepped into the room, shutting the door softly behind her. "You're 30 seconds from chewing a hole through your lip," she said. "Deep breaths." He exhaled. "Everyone's here?" he asked. "Shareholders are filling the seats," she said. "Press is outside, not inside. That's a battle for another day. Board members are whispering like nervous pigeons. Your stepmother is holding court near the front, looking like grief in a designer dress." He almost smiled. She crossed the room and stood in front of him, tilting her head as she studied his tie. "You did it right this time," she said, very proud. "My hands only shook twice," he said. "Progress." He looked at her. She wore a simple blazer and blouse, hair let loose, makeup light, nothing flashy. She looked like what she was, a woman with a job to do. The security team would keep her away from the stage. Her name wasn't on any official list, but she would be in the audience, near the back, eyes on him. That thought steadied him. "Last chance to run," she said softly. "Back door. Flight to anywhere. Live on a farm and raise goats." He snorted. "I don't like goats." "Fine. Chickens." "I don't like them either." "Wow," she said, "you're difficult." He swallowed again, trying to dislodge the lump in his throat. "Joyce," he said. She looked up, reading something in his tone. He reached out, not thinking about who might walk in, and took her hand. It was warm, solid. "I'm asking God to walk into that room with you," she said before he could speak, voice low. "You're not going alone, even if you feel like you are." His grip tightened. He hadn't prayed since his father's funeral. Not really. He'd thrown words at the ceiling, cursed under his breath, but he hadn't reached. Now he found himself doing something he didn't know how to name, hoping that if her God did walk into that room, he would stay. He squeezed her hand like an anchor. "Stay where I can see you," he murmured. "Already planned," she replied. A knock on the door. "Director Kang?" Ji-hoon's voice. "It's time." He let go slowly. Joyce stepped back, shoulders squaring. "Go be the man your father prayed for," she said. "I'll be in the cheap seats, judging your delivery." He huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. Then he walked out. The boardroom had been a battleground. The auditorium was an arena. Rows of seats sloped downward toward a stage where 3 long tables formed a shallow U. One for the board, one for executives, one for legal counsel. A podium stood at the open end. Screens on either side displayed the Kang Group logo, a stylized dragon circling a sphere. Madame Kang sat at the center of the board table, chairwoman's nameplate in front of her. She wore black, pearls at her throat, expression serene. She looked like a widow carved out of ice. Murmurs rippled through the room as Do-hyun walked down the side aisle toward the front. Some heads turned away, uncomfortable. Others followed him, curious. He felt the weight of every gaze. He didn't stumble. He took his seat at the executive table, flanked by Ji-hoon and the CFO. Attorney Park sat a little behind, briefcase at his feet like a weapon. The meeting began with formality. Minutes approved, reports presented, charts flashed on screens, profit margins, expansion plans, risk assessments. It all washed over him. He heard words like strategic diversification and emerging markets, but under it all, a humming tension grew. Everyone knew why they were really here. Finally, Madam Kang tapped the microphone. "As some of you know," she said, her voice perfectly modulated, "this year has been challenging for our family, and therefore for the company." Cameras clicked, small ones, shareholders snapping discreet pictures. "My son, Director Kang," she continued, "suffered a tragic personal crisis. We are grateful he is still with us. However," a small, rehearsed sigh, "questions have been raised about his readiness to resume full responsibility." She looked down the table toward him, eyes soft. He met her gaze without flinching. "For the sake of transparency," she went on, "I have asked our legal counsel to present the guardianship extension request we have filed, not because we doubt his heart, but because we must protect the interests of all stakeholders." The lawyer cleared his throat and began reading legalese about duty of care and medical advisories. In the back of the room, Joyce watched, jaw tight. She could feel the room shifting, some nodding along, others glancing at their phones to see how the story was playing online. She wanted to stand up and shout. Instead, she squeezed the sticky note in her pocket. "You're more than what they did to you." When the lawyer finished, Madam Kang smiled and turned her microphone back on. "We all love Director Kang," she said. "We want him to heal fully. Until then, I propose that we ratify the extension of his guardianship and limit his voting authority." "Objection!" The word rang through the room, clear. Every head snapped toward him. Do-hyun stood. The microphone picked up the scrape of his chair. "I object," he repeated, voice steady. Madam Kang's smile tightened. "Director Kang," she said, tone indulgent, "this is not a courtroom. You can speak in your turn." "This is my turn," he said. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. He stepped away from the table, cane forgotten. His legs trembled once, then held. He walked to the podium. His heart hammered so hard he wondered if the microphones would pick it up. He found Joyce near the back, her face a small island in a sea of strangers. She nodded once. He looked down at his notes. His fingers brushed the edge of a sticky note taped inside the folder. "You're more than what they did to you." He took a breath that hurt and spoke. "When my father died," he began, "I thought my story ended with him." The room quieted. "I was the son everyone pitied," he said. "Born to a woman they never talk about at dinners. Raised in a house where my presence was a problem to be managed, not a person to be known." No buzz now, just listening. "I want to be clear," he said. "I am not here today to ask for your pity. I have had enough of pity to last a lifetime." A few nervous chuckles. "I am here," he continued, "to tell you the truth about why I disappeared, why I was too weak to stand in rooms like this, why my father's heir looked more like his ghost." He lifted the neurologist's report. "For over a decade, my health was managed by a doctor paid by my stepmother," he said. "He prescribed a cocktail of medications, sedatives, muscle relaxants, that kept me safe. So safe I could barely think straight." Murmurs, some incredulous, some outraged. "These are independent toxicology reports," he said, gesturing to the screens as Park gave a signal. The screens flicked to images, lab charts, highlighted lines, summaries. 3 separate specialists have concluded that my mysterious illness was not a congenital weakness, he said. It was iatrogenic harm, medical damage. I was not born fragile. I was made that way. The room erupted. Gasps, disbelieving shouts, questions thrown like stones. He waited. Park leaned into his mic. Please, the lawyer said, allow Director Kang to finish. The noise died down. I do not claim my stepmother set out to poison me, he said. Intent is for investigators to decide. But I know what those pills did. I know how many board meetings I missed because I couldn't stay awake. I know how many times I was told, let your mother handle it. He looked at her. Madame Kang's face was pale, but her eyes burned. I have recordings, he said, of the family doctor admitting he prescribed medications not medically necessary under pressure from Mrs. Kang. I have testimony from staff who saw my symptoms worsen after her special tea. I have bank records showing company funds siphoned into shell entities under the names of her relatives. The screens changed again. Carefully redacted excerpts. Flowcharts tracing money. You can all see this, he said. Later, in detail. Today, I want you to see something else. He paused. Joyce saw his hand tighten on the edge of the podium. My father was not a perfect man, he said. He made mistakes, but he believed in this company. He believed it could be more than numbers. He believed it could have a conscience. He thought of late nights at his father's desk, hearing stories about struggles and second chances. He wrote in his will that he entrusted the heart of the company to me, he went on, not because I was clever. I wasn't. Not because I was strong. I was not allowed to be, but because he believed that a man who knows the cost of weakness would be careful with power. He let that sink in. For years, I failed that trust, he said. I let others speak for me. I let the fog swallow me. I almost ended the story myself. He didn't say the word bridge. He didn't need to. Silence held. Then someone who owed me nothing looked at me and said, You don't get to throw your life away, he continued, voice roughening. She did not ask what was in my will. She did not care about shares or voting rights. She cared that I was breathing. He didn't look at Joyce. He didn't need to. It shamed me, he said simply. In a good way. It made me realize that my father did not put me in this position so I could hide. He put me here so I could stand. He straightened. So I am standing, he said. He turned slightly, addressing the room, but his words were aimed at one woman. I forgive you, he said, as my father's wife. Gasps. A few incredulous laughs. I forgive you, he repeated, because I need to put down the weight of hating you if I'm going to carry this company forward. But forgiveness is not the same as permission. I will not allow you to harm this company or anyone I love again. Madame Kang's composure cracked for the first time. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. Director Kang, she said, microphone picking up the tremor beneath her ice. You are confused. You have been manipulated. He cut in smoothly. I move, he said, for an emergency vote to remove Mrs. Kang from her positions as chairwoman and guardian, and to revoke all special authorities granted to her based on my supposed incapacity. The room exploded. This is outrageous, one of her allies shouted. He is clearly unstable. Order, the company secretary called, banging a small gavel. Park stood. Under Article 7, Section 3 of the bylaws, he said calmly, a director with standing and evidence of malfeasance may call for such a vote. Director Kang has provided documented grounds. Her allies argued about timing, about procedure, about optics. Shareholders whispered frantically. Some looked at the charts. Some looked at their phones. A few looked at the framed photo of Chairman Kang on the wall and seemed to be asking it what to do. In the back, Joyce's heart pounded so hard she felt it in her teeth. This was it. This was where everything either cracked or held. The company secretary, after a rapid, hushed consultation with Park and external counsel, cleared his throat. "We will proceed," he said. "Shareholders, prepare your ballots. Board members, your votes will be counted and weighted accordingly." Digital pads lit up at each seat. For a few agonizing minutes, the auditorium was filled with the soft tapping of fingers and the rustle of paper. Joyce closed her eyes. God, she thought, I know I said I trusted you more than my fear. Please don't make me prove it by watching him lose everything. She opened her eyes when the secretary stepped back up. The motion to remove Mrs. Kang from her leadership positions and terminate her guardianship passes, he said, by a margin of 52 to 48%. It was razor thin. It was enough. The room reacted like a bomb had gone off. Some cheered. Some shouted in anger. A few stormed toward the exits, phones already at their ears, calling whoever was next in line for panic. Security approached the board table, hesitant. Madame Kang sat very still. She looked at each man and woman around her, the ones who had smiled at her parties, toasted her at fundraisers. Some looked away. Others met her gaze, apologetic, calculating, hard. She rose slowly. My husband built this empire, she said, voice quiet but carrying. I kept it alive while his son floated in a medicated fog, and his so-called friends circled like vultures. No one interrupted. You think replacing me with him will bring you peace? She asked. You think he will be easier to control simply because he knows how to make a pretty confession speech? Her eyes flicked toward the back of the room. Found Joyce. Their gazes locked. In that look was a world of promise. None of it good. Joyce's skin crawled. Madame Kang smiled. Just a little. We'll see, she said. Security stepped closer. Chairwoman Kang, one of them said, we must ask you to... Do not touch me, she snapped, but she let them escort her. Her heels clicked against the floor as she walked down the aisle, the same aisle Joyce had taken earlier. Shareholders parted around her like water around a rock. She passed Joyce without stopping. As she did, her perfume wrapped around Joyce. Sharp, expensive, metallic. She murmured, almost too low to catch. This is not over. Then she was gone. People surged toward the stage, some to congratulate, some to interrogate, some to align themselves with the new normal. Joyce stayed put. Her knees felt like jelly. On stage, surrounded by noise and flashing screens, Couldnt Do-hyun stood a little dazed, as if someone had taken the weight off his shoulders, and he hadn't decided yet whether he missed it. Ji-hoon clapped him on the back. Park looked like a man who'd watched a client do exactly what he'd hoped for and still been surprised. It took an hour for the crowd to thin. He shook hands, nodded, answered questions he wouldn't have touched 2 months ago. About reform, about transparency, about what came next. He did not mention his stepmother again. When he finally made it back to the quiet room upstairs, Joyce wasn't there. He checked his watch. She should have been up by now. He'd asked her, half joking, to grade his performance. He pulled out his phone. No messages. He called. Her phone rang once, then dropped straight to voicemail. He frowned. You're doing amazing, Kang. This is Joyce. I'm probably in a meeting or accidentally napping. Leave a message. He hung up, heartbeat picking up. Ji-hoon stepped in, closing the door behind him. They're already drafting press statements, he said. We'll need to... Have you seen Joyce? Do-hyun interrupted. Ji-hoon blinked. She was in the back row, he said. I saw her when you dropped the poisoning bomb. She looked like she wanted to throw a hymnal at your stepmother. Why? She's not here, he said. She didn't answer my call. So she went back to Hanul, Ji-hoon said. Or home. Her phone battery dies all the time. You said so yourself. She was supposed to meet me, he insisted. She wouldn't just vanish. Not today. Ji-hoon's expression shifted. Concern slid into place. He pulled out his own phone. I'll call Min, he said. He was assigned to her section. He stepped away, speaking low. Minutes stretched. Finally, he turned back, face too carefully blank. What? Do-hyun demanded. What did he say? Security escorted her to the lobby, Ji-hoon said slowly. She told them she needed to run back to her apartment to change before a Hanul meeting. It seemed reasonable. They attempted to follow, but she insisted she could take one guard, said she didn't want to be a spectacle. That's it? He asked. For now, Ji-hoon said. We'll check the building cameras. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she's yelling at a taxi driver somewhere. He tried her number again. Voicemail. A cold knot formed in his gut. Call the driver, he said. Mine. Hyung. Call him. Ji-hoon did. The driver answered immediately. Yes, director? Go to Miss Cole's building, Do-hyun said, the words coming out clipped. Now. Call me when you're there. The drive was 15 minutes on a good day. It took 20 in midday traffic. Those 20 minutes felt like hours. He paced the small room, ignoring Ji-hoon's attempts to distract him with updates about the board's post-vote scrambling. His phone finally buzzed. He answered before the second ring. What do you see? He asked. Silence. Then the driver's voice, shaken in a way he'd never heard. Director Kang, he said. Her apartment door is open. The world narrowed. Open? He repeated. Yes, the driver said. Not fully. Ajar. There is glass on the floor. A mug. Broken. No answer when I call her name. The room spun. He grabbed the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. Do not go in, he said, forcing his voice to stay level. Wait for security. Call Min and Chong. Call the police. Yes, sir. The line clicked. He lowered the phone slowly. Ji-hoon watched his face and swore quietly. What? He asked. What is it? She's not there, Do-hyun said. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. Her door's open. Mug on the floor, no Joyce. For a moment, no one breathed. The empire outside hummed on. Stocks trading, emails firing, shareholders toasting their newly reclaimed moral compass. Inside the quiet room, Kang Do-hyun felt the ground shift under his feet again. Only this time, there was no rail to climb. And if someone had taken her, if someone had laid hands on the woman who dragged him back from death, then the war he just declared in front of the board was about to turn into something much, much darker. The rain hit hard, the kind that poured like a river from the sky, splattering against the pavement in wild sheets. The sound was deafening, like the world had decided to drown everything else out. But in the abandoned warehouse, Joyce could still hear the whisper of her own breath. She'd been taken, kidnapped if she was being blunt. 4 men, unmarked, wearing dark clothes and no faces. No explanations. Just the hard shove of an armored truck door opening, followed by the cold press of ropes cutting into her skin as they dragged her inside. They'd put her in a corner, tied her to a rusted chair, and left her alone in the gloom to wonder why. She tried to focus on the memory of the last argument with Do-hyun, where she had threatened to leave. God, how she would have regretted that now. You got me this far, God, she whispered under her breath, trying to steady her pulse. I'm not dying in some enemy warehouse. Not like this. There were men outside the door, the low hum of their voices like an unsettling lullaby. They spoke too quietly for her to make out the words. Every so often, Their eyes would shift to her, but she stayed silent. No pleading, no begging. She wasn't broken. Not yet. Not while there was still something to fight for. Her hands, bound behind her back, dug into the ropes, trying to find some leverage. The storm outside crashed louder, as though the world was taking her side. She didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. Do-hyun wouldn't be able to save her. Would he? Back in the penthouse, Do-hyun's entire body trembled with cold fury as he stared at the phone in his hand. He had called the police. He had called his contacts, both legal and political, but it all felt too slow, too distant. The moment they found Joyce missing, his world had been shattered. He had felt it like the thud of his own heartbeat, the worst kind of silence. She was supposed to be safe. She wasn't. Every pulse in his body was a clock ticking against time, and time was never on his side. "She talked me out of death," he muttered, voice low, barely audible. "I won't let death touch her." He turned to Ji-hoon, who stood by the window, his face grim as he made phone calls with urgent speed. "Set up the teams," Do-hyun ordered. "Police, private security, whoever can find them. We're going to get her back. Now." Ji-hoon didn't hesitate, immediately dialing another number, his eyes flicking over to Do-hyun. The plans were made fast, brutal, without care for what would happen next. There would be no time for subtlety, no politeness, just a raid. Madame Kang's day of triumph collapsed with a deafening crash. Joyce was alive, and that alone was enough to shatter whatever fragile plan Madame Kang had thought she could hold. Do-hyun hadn't waited for the police to take the lead. When Joyce had been taken, when the phone had gone silent, he had called in every favor, used every connection, and called in his private security team. The raid was swift, ruthless. Do-hyun had arrived just as the storm outside had begun to rage harder. The rain smacked against the windows of the old family property. Inside, the kidnappers were scrambling. They weren't used to being chased. They weren't used to facing someone who had nothing left to lose. He led the charge. "Move," he ordered, voice hard. With every step, he didn't care who was in the way. He didn't care about the news, about the headlines, about the legal consequences. All that mattered was her. Joyce barely noticed when the door opened. Her eyes had closed, but her mind was sharp. The sound of footsteps, faintly familiar, scraped against the edges of her focus. Her pulse quickened. For a long moment there was silence. Then a voice she hadn't expected. "Joyce!" She blinked, trying to focus through the fog of pain and exhaustion. There, in the doorway, was a figure tall, broad, and so completely out of place that her heart skipped a beat. It was Do-hyun, alive. His hair was wet, plastered to his forehead by the rain. His clothes clung to his frame, soaked from the storm, but his eyes were filled with something more than the shock she expected. His eyes were full of rage and determination. She let out a laugh, weak because she couldn't help it. The tension of everything built up inside her, cracking her voice into something that wasn't quite joy. "You're late," she whispered, though her voice trembled like paper. He didn't say a word. Instead, he rushed forward, breaking the lock on her ropes with a strength that left her gasping. He pulled her close, like he needed to make sure she was real. She closed her eyes against his chest, listening to the rapid beat of his heart, her hands gripping his shoulders like they were the last solid thing in the world. "You're okay," he said softly, his voice hoarse, like he couldn't quite believe it. "I'm here. I'm not letting you go." The weight in his chest finally gave way. He lifted her into his arms, as though carrying her from one life to the next. "I'll never be late again," he promised. Back at the penthouse, Joyce sat wrapped in a thick blanket, bruised but alive. She hadn't slept, not properly, since she'd been taken, but now she felt safe in his arms. He sat beside her, silent, watching her with a raw intensity that unsettled her. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the way he held his apology in his clenched jaw. He didn't know how to speak it. She reached for his hand, holding it firmly, like it was her last tether. "You got hurt because of me," he said, voice thick with guilt. She shook her head, pressing her palm against his chest. "I got hurt standing beside you," she replied, voice soft but firm. "And I'd do it again. Just don't go back to the bridge." His eyes flickered, but there was no more regret in them. He leaned forward, his hand cupping her cheek gently, his thumb brushing the faint bruises on her skin. "Why did you come every day?" he asked again quietly. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, she simply looked at him, at the man who had been broken and rebuilt, who now stood before her, not as the fragile heir, but as a man who had chosen to live. She smiled, her lips trembling as she whispered the truth. "Because someone didn't let me forget you." His breath caught in his chest. His next words came without thought, without hesitation. "I don't know how long I'll live, maybe a year, maybe 50, but whatever time I have left," he paused, taking her hands in his, "I want it to be with the woman who stayed when I wanted to die." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Then live, really live," she whispered. His hand tightened around hers. It wasn't a proposal, not with rings and velvet boxes, but it was everything they both needed, the quiet after the storm. The weeks after felt different, not just because the battle for Kang Group had been won, or because the storm had passed, leaving only the remnants of shattered glass from Madame Kang's empire. No, it was different because for the first time in a long while, Do-hyun was breathing deeply. He felt lighter, stronger, not just physically, but in the deepest parts of himself. And the moment he realized he was truly free was the moment he found Joyce sitting on their balcony, looking out over the city that had almost destroyed them. The air was crisp now, a slight chill reminding him that everything had changed. His hand found the doorframe, and he stood there for a moment, watching her. She was wrapped in the same blanket she'd worn on their late-night walks, her dark hair falling in soft waves, her expression quiet and thoughtful. He smiled, knowing she was probably lost in one of her prayers. She was always praying for something, even when it wasn't obvious. He stepped out onto the balcony, his footsteps soft against the cold tiles. She looked up when she heard him. "You're up early," she said, voice as warm as the tea they'd shared so many nights before. He leaned against the railing beside her, feeling the weight of the last few days settling into his bones. "I have a lot to catch up on," he said, his voice still low with emotion. "But first—" She raised an eyebrow, half smiling. "What?" He reached into his jacket pocket. Her gaze followed the movement. Then her eyes went wide as he pulled out a small velvet box. Joyce froze for a heartbeat. Then she blinked, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "Do-hyun," she whispered. He smiled, his heart racing in his chest. "I know this wasn't part of the plan. We've been through a lot. Too much to just end it with a kiss and call it a day." She shook her head, eyes softening with understanding. "Joyce, when I was lost in the dark, on that bridge, I didn't know what I was holding on to. I didn't know what could pull me back. And then you showed up. You stayed with me. You fought for me, even when I couldn't fight for myself." He opened the box, revealing a simple, delicate ring. No diamonds, no grandeur, just a small gold band that felt like the most perfect symbol of everything they had become. "Everything I've done, everything I've overcome, I've done it for me, but I've also done it for you. You taught me how to live again, how to hope again." Her breath caught and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I don't know how much time I have here on Earth. Maybe 50, maybe longer. I don't know. But what I do know is that every moment I get, I want to spend with you. Not because I need saving anymore, but because I need you in every way. She looked at him, her heart echoing the same truth that had been building between them all along. I choose you, always. Joyce, he said, his voice quiet but steady, will you marry me? Not because it's the next step, not because of anyone else's expectations, but because this is the only future I want. The question hung in the air between them, fragile but powerful. Joyce exhaled softly, her eyes softening with the weight of the love they had built, and then, in a voice filled with everything she had longed to say, she whispered, "Yes, I will." Her smile, slow and knowing, lit up her entire face. "I will, Do-hyun. I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had always belonged there, as if this moment, this choice, was written long before they had ever met. And then he kissed her, softly, with the taste of salt from his tears, mixing with the sweetness of her acceptance. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur. Not the kind of whirlwind they expected after everything they had faced, but a different kind. There was peace now, a rare stillness where both of them could finally breathe without worrying what the next crisis would bring. The wedding itself wasn't grand. There were no billion-dollar venues or celebrity guests. It was small, intimate, with only their closest friends, family, and a few old family allies who had supported Do-hyun through thick and thin. Joyce wore a simple white dress, the fabric delicate and understated, the kind of dress that didn't need to scream for attention because it was enough on its own. Her hair was loosely gathered, and she didn't wear a veil, just a simple flower in her hair. Do-hyun, dressed in a dark suit, looked every bit the heir to his father's empire, but for the first time, he wore it without the weight of the world on his shoulders. They stood in the garden behind his penthouse. Flowers bloomed quietly around them, the air filled with the scent of jasmine and roses. The officiant, an old family friend, spoke of love not as a fairy tale, but as a choice, a partnership that demands more than promises. He spoke of resilience, of faith, of moments that build a lifetime. But when Do-hyun looked at Joyce, it wasn't just the vows that mattered. It was everything that had led to this moment. The late nights, the brokenness, the small gestures of love that had shaped their lives. She squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back, both of them laughing softly at some private joke. And then she said it. The words that meant more than anything else in the world. "I do." He whispered his answer, a promise of forever. "I do." The kiss they shared sealed the deal, but more than that, it sealed their hearts. In front of the people who had stood by them, in front of a world that had tested them, they chose each other. Forever. Months passed, but the love between them didn't fade. It only grew. Do-hyun was healthier, stronger. He'd taken full control of his empire, but now, instead of fighting for survival, he was building for the future. The company was thriving under his leadership, but with clear boundaries that had never existed before. Joyce ran a foundation funded by Kang Group, supporting mental health initiatives and helping international students adjust to life in Seoul. She felt a deep satisfaction in her work, in the way her heart beat for a cause that went beyond personal gain. The faith they had shared, though unspoken, remained a cornerstone of their bond. Before every big decision, they prayed together, asking for guidance and giving thanks. There were no grand speeches, no public displays, just quiet moments of trust, knowing that the choices they made were grounded in something deeper than the world could see. One quiet evening, They returned to the bridge. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the cool breath of the storm. Do-hyun leaned on the railing, eyes lost in the water below. "This is where I chose death," he said softly, voice steady now, "and where God sent you instead." Joyce nudged him with a half smile. "Good thing you're bad at dying." He wrapped an arm around her, drawing her close. "With you," he said, his voice full of certainty, "I'm finally ready for everything." She leaned her head against his shoulder, her breath light against his skin. "For whatever comes after forever," she whispered, repeating the words from so long ago, and this time there was no doubt. They had made it. Together. The future was theirs. The end.
I was lost in shadows deep 어둠 속에서 I couldn't find the light I used to know 그대가 오기 전까지